What's up, everybody? This is Ben, and today we have an exciting topic, and that is firmware version 1.6 of the Roland MC-101 Groove Box. Now, there's a lot of exciting things that have come this time, and I'm just going to talk about some of my favorites. I will mention just about all of them that there are, but I'm going to go a little bit deeper into some of my favorites. If you haven't updated your firmware yet, I recommend you follow this tutorial, which will be in the description or up top, and it is by DJ FX All Mix. I don't know how to say your name, I'm sorry about that. It's a great tutorial, makes it super simple. That's the one that I follow every time that I need to update this. So go ahead and follow that, and once you're updated, we can jump right in and start talking about it. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is we can now load drum kits from the Soundpacks that you purchased from Roland. Now, I've only purchased one of these. There's like 30 or something that you can buy now. They're all pretty cool. Some of them are focused on different genres. Some of them are focused on different types of sounds. This is the Future Beat kit. This is from the Future Pack, which is the first one that I bought. So it's pretty neat. They've always been there, but we couldn't use the drum ones on the 101 before. Now we can. Pretty great, I think. But now let's get into some of the bigger, more exciting features. So I just have a simple drum track going here with kick and snare, hi-hat, sounds alright. And I'm going to talk about the Arpeggiator. That's the one everyone's got on their minds, and it is pretty cool. So right here I have this feedback pluck sound preset, which is pretty cool. And to turn on the Arpeggiator, we're going to hold the note button, and it says ARP on there. If I hold it again, it'll say ARP off. You can hold it, and that turns the Arpeggiator on. You can also hold exit and hit the note button to turn it on and off faster. On, off. So if it's on, pretty cool, pretty cool. So by default, if you you can change all the settings of the Arpeggiator by hitting Shift and Note, and then you're gonna scroll over to where it says ARP Edit up top, and those are your Arpeggiator settings. So you have motif, variation, octave, and hold. So by default, hold is on. So if you start hitting notes, it'll just keep playing them, and then you can turn it. You can stop it by turning the Arpeggiator off and then back on. But I kind of like leaving it off. I like leaving hold off. So I'm going to turn hold to off. I'm going to turn the Arpeggiator back on. So now when I hold it like this, it does stuff like this. Now you can change different settings. So let's go to the beginning. We have a note order, which means it'll play the notes in the order that you play them. So if I were to go, you can get pretty interesting things like that. There's a bunch of different ones. Up, down, which will always play them in down, always play them going up, up and down, which will bounce back and forth for however many notes you hit. Sounds pretty cool. Random, plays with random notes. Note order, I really like note order because you can sort of control the randomness a little bit. Glissando's kind of neat, it just slides between them chromatically. Kind of fun. And then there's some other ones. Not exactly sure the order that they go in, but they sound pretty cool. Play around with them. Pretty fun. I'm gonna leave on note order. Variation is cool. Different like time scales go real fast. Oh, and then some of the later ones have like some rhythm there. You can get some rhythms going. Pretty neat, pretty neat. And then we have octave range, which will go up higher or lower. But you can get some cool effects that way. So and then hold. So those are the options that you have on the Arpeggiator. So a really cool thing I found, just messing around a little bit with the Arpeggiator, was that if you hit play, if you hit record and play, we're going to play the drum track. And then if I just hold some notes down, it plays them and it prints them to the pattern. So importantly, if I now take a look at the sequence, you can see that it put these notes in the sequence. These are all the different notes that the arpeggiator played in the sequence. So that's pretty neat. So it'll keep playing exactly that. Even if I turn the arpeggiator off now, the notes that the arpeggiator was playing are written into the sequence. So it'll keep playing this pattern. That opens some interesting doors. So if I clear this sequence like this, now we just have our drum track again. Now we can fake some automation, which I think is pretty cool. So if I hit Shift, Note, and now I'm in my ARP edit mode, and I want to go to like octave range, for example. I'm going to click this, so now whenever I turn this dial, it changes the octave range. Now, if I hit play, and I start messing with it, say I play like a D minor chord. Oh, let me turn the arpeggiator on. Good, now I'm gonna hit Shift, Note, come back to octave range, and hit this button in so I can change this like this, ready? Now I'm gonna hit like a D chord. Now we can twist this, get a little variation in there. So we can really spread the scale just from our little pads here. So if we record that, since the sequencer is only recording what is being played by the arpeggiator, if you change the arpeggiator parameters in real time while you're playing, it will record those. It doesn't record the changes, but it records the notes that those changes cause. So just for example, if I hit record and then hit play, and then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to wait for it to come back around to the beginning. Now we can see we get those little variations that we put in with this thing, which I think is a super, super cool use of the arpeggiator. So you can play around with that. Have a blast. It's really fun. It's a lot of fun. But more features to talk about. Moving on. Oh, I did want to mention they added generic drivers for this, which means it can pass MIDI and audio to like an iPhone or an iPad or whatever smart device, which is pretty neat. So to turn that on, you go into Utility and System and USB driver. So by default it's on vendor, which means if you plug it into the computer and you have the drivers downloaded on your computer, it will work the way that you expect it to, the way that you're used to. But if you change this parameter, you can set it to generic, which will let it work with generic USB audio. I'm gonna go into that probably in a more advanced tutorial or something. But it's a pretty neat feature. If you have an iPad, iPhone, whatever in your setup, that I think will be super useful to you. So, great, I think that's neat. Continuing, new scatter functionality. Now, if you've been following just my lessons, I haven't talked about scatter yet, and I think there's a good reason for that, and that is, one, it's complicated. It's not too complicated, but I've been starting at a very beginner level, and we haven't gotten there yet, and we'll get there. No, don't worry about that, we'll get there. The main reason, though, I haven't really focused on it is that, to me, it's a really fantastic bonus, but it's not super important for like the core of making music. So I haven't touched on it yet, but we do have a really neat new scatter functionality. And so first, brief overview of scatter, if you're not familiar. I'm just gonna set this and we'll talk about that in a second. So scatter, each button does some weird effect. And you can edit what all the weird effects do. These are just the default effects on this particular project. So if you're just playing your track, some like gating effects there, and then weird like some reversal effects, some pitch stuff. can sound absolutely wild. Can be useful in some situations, but it's pretty wild. What we've done, us MC-101 people, up until now, is gone to the scatter setting menu and changed the position. So normally on mix out, it does everything on the track, but you can change it to only affect a specific track, which makes it a little bit more manageable. So if I only set it on track 2, which is controlling the arpeggiator that we just made, then if I hit a button, the drums will keep playing, but it will only affect the arpeggiated track. So you can hear the drums are still going, but the pitched stuff is getting all weird. So what they added now was the ability to change the position, which track the scatter affects per pad. So that's really something. So for example, if I take this pad, you can change. So normally you have all these effects, and this pause, which stands for position, you can make that go on just on track 1. So now all of the pads, since I went in the shift scatter setting menu, the position of the scatter as a whole is on track 2, but you can change the individual pads. So the position of pad 9 is on track 1, which means all of the pads except for pad 9 will affect the tone track, the arpeggiator track, and track 9, or pad 9, will affect just the drum track. So for example, if I'm playing, if I hit this, you hear the arpeggiated track keeps going. Now you could use that for a mute. That was a coincidence that you got a mute there. See how the arpeggiator keeps going, but the kick drum is now being repeated? So that's super, super cool. And I think will make scatter a even more useful performance effect. So I'm pretty excited about that. They also added a feature where if you have something you can control what MIDI notes it sends out, you can control the scatter effects from MIDI. Now I use these nice Launchpad X's with this all the time. And I'm going to do some videos on that at some point. So these guys, for example, you could set up a preset, have that trigger the scatter settings, which can be really fun in a live performance scenario, I think. So that's scatter. And okay, so if you've watched my drum video, which I'll link somewhere, up or down, you know that you can do like rolls and flams and double strokes on the drum track. So in the new firmware, you can do that also on a tone track. So I've prepared ahead of time a tone track here on track 3 with this squeeze synth. Oh, I'm going to turn the arpeggiator off. So the arpeggiator works on all the tracks, and it's a global setting that it's on or off for the pads. But even like on a drum track, you can kind of get some funky stuff with that, so have at it, have fun. But anyway, so on track 3, I have this, and I have a sequence that I made. Nothing too special. So if you've watched maybe my sound design video or my drum video, you know that if you hit shift and then the pad, you get these settings. And they're super useful, and they do great things. But we've added now a new setting, and if I hit the pad a second time, we get this sub setting on this pad, which is sub step, which works the same way as the drums do if you've watched the drum video. So if I'm on this step here, so if I turn this to like 1 or 2 or 3, we can go, hear that? Boom. Yeah. And yeah, so that's pretty nifty. You can do all sorts of things. Not a bad thing to keep in the back of your head. So you just you hit the pad, and then tapping the pad switches between the screen that we're used to with velocity, start time, and length, and substep. So you can do some, I think probably some pretty fancy things. Yeah, pretty neat, pretty neat. So the converse of that is on drum tracks, we have added they've added a length parameter, which is pretty nifty. So if I, for example, have a sample, example for a sample, like this, which is a longer sample, if you hit to set it up, to get this sort of set up, you hit Shift and the pad, bring up, I'm going to do another, I did a whole drum video, I haven't talked about using user samples, but you can add samples like this. If you're a sampling type of person, you're probably familiar with this. So I'm going to go to pad edit and set the envelope to sustain. By default it's at no sustain, but if you set it to sustain, then it plays until you let go of the pad, which is, I think, useful for a lot of things. So we have that. Now, up until now, it was tricky to control this, to control the pad in terms of when you're using a pattern, when you want to record that. So we have a great way to do it now. So I'm going to hit this, and I'm going to go into this to select it. I'm going to go into the step sequencer. I'm going to put it on pad number 1, step 1, and when I play it, it only plays for the first length of the step. Cuts off immediately. So I'm going to hit Shift and the pad, just like we did in the drum video. Getting pretty used to it by now, and just like I did on the tone track, I'm going to hit it again, and I find this new parameter that is called end. So end goes from 1, 0, all the way up to 99, and then it says tie. Ooh. Okay, so if we start like at a low value, well, we won't even hear it at all because the sample doesn't start right at the beginning, but as we go up, it plays longer. And if I go all the way to tie, it means it'll carry over into the next note. So what we can do now is we can hit the next, or we can exit this mode and hit the next note. And now, I don't know if you can see in the camera, but this came up a little bit, that came up as red but dimmer. And now it'll play all the way through this step as well. So now if I go to step 2, if I hit Shift, step 2, now the end by default is at 80, so I'm going to twist this over and bring it up to tie again, and then I'm going to add a step here on step 3. So now it's playing all the way through the first 3 steps. Now there's 2 easier ways to do this. The first is make a bunch of notes like this, and then hit Shift and the button, and now we have this. Set it to tie, hit this, set it to tie, we need to hit step 3, set it to tie, step 6, set it to tie, step 7, set it to tie, step 8, set it to tie, and now we have, now all of the first 8 steps are tied. That's all well and good. There is a much easier way to do this, so don't worry. So I'm going to exit this, and now I'm going to get rid of this step, which gets rid of all of these, and then I'm going to get rid of these. Now we have nothing in the sequencer anymore. So the easy way to enter a tied note is hit exit. So exit and then add the pad, and now we can just, these are all, hopefully you can see on the camera, these are all tied notes. So now, there we go. Now we're talking. Now you can do some fun stuff with this. I've just been messing around. I don't do a lot of house music or even a lot of hip-hop music. I'm not particularly a sample-based person, but there's some cool stuff you can do. For example, if you hold exit and hit this note, it switches it from a tied to not a tied, which means, so like this way, it'll restart when it gets to here. Cool. And then I hit it again, and now it's back to a tie, and it doesn't restart the sample, which is pretty neat. So now you can do, I think it's fun. You can do stuff like this. So we get this going, and now crazy stuff. That wasn't so smooth, but you get what I'm saying. So I think that's pretty freaking cool. And it's a really, really useful way to be able to use samples. You can do it live. It makes it a lot easier to program sample stuff in here. And it's just fantastic. So cool, you know? Great stuff. I think that's a really neat feature. So, we're closing in. We're getting there. We're getting there. There's one more feature I want to talk about real quick, and that is the compressor. So the compressor got a couple... So, if you just watch my videos, you may not know there is a master effects, there's a master compressor on here, which means all of the tracks run through the compressor. It's a multi-band compressor, so you can do some pretty sophisticated mastering with it. And I think that's great, and we're going to talk at some point in a future video about how to do compression and that stuff and why you might want to do it. But for right now, if you use the compressor, we're just going to talk about some things that they added. So the first thing they added was this release sync, which I think is a cool feature. So if you know about using mastering compressors, you probably know that you want to time the release so it sort of like helps pulse your song along. If you're not at a point where you're doing compression on the master bus or whatever, don't worry about it. But I think this is a cool feature that helps you really like sync that release in. I honestly haven't played with it much yet, but I'm pretty excited to try it out. And I think it's a really cool feature. But the feature that I'm actually happier about is this this little indicator here that shows you how much compression is happening. So you can see this is the low band, and then the mid band. You can see how much compression is happening, and then on the high band, you can see how much compression is happening, which I think is pretty cool. And not only is it cool, I think it's a fantastic little like visual effect. In fact, I've found myself just leaving this up because it sort of bumps along to the music. So I just, if I'm playing and jamming out on my keyboard controller or whatever, I just leave this going because this is a great screen to look at. It's very fun. And I think that's pretty freaking neat. Yeah, so I mean, you know, you want to use compression mostly with your ears. A little visual is not, whoops, I just kicked the microphone stand. A little visual is not hurtful, but I think it's just a cool effect. And if you just leave it up there, then you got a nice little like bouncing little line for you. And I think that is pretty swell. Look at that, it's beautiful. Alright, so this is the big one. This new feature. This is the last new feature we're going to talk about. Oh, they did some really cool stuff. If you real quick, they made the load times a lot quicker. If I want to save this, right, project, boom, if you're on firmware 1.3 or higher, that was lightning fast compared to what you're used to. So that's pretty slick as well. Alright, great. So the last big, huge, incredible feature to me is the random tone generator. Wow. It's fantastic. I really can't stress that enough. That's why I'm so excited. I'm going to do a whole nother video just on the random tone generator. But for right now, all you do is you pick a new tone and you hit random. And then you got a bunch of different algorithms to choose from. And I'm going to go through real quick what I think they're good for. So all you do is you hit the button once, complete new synth. If you like what you hear, hit exit real quick, because if you hit the button again, you'll lose the sound forever, which isn't so bad. I've found just playing with it that even if I lose something, within 5 or so more rolls of the dice, so to speak, you get something not so far away. So I'm going to go back to here. So just real quick, like I said, I'll make a whole nother video on this. But the poly, this gives you a digital poly synth. You can get some real nice like FM sorts of keys. That's wild. Well, that's pretty gritty. I like a kick in there. That's pretty slick. So you can always go to your regular tone and edit settings and adjust stuff. Which, if you're not familiar with those, check out my sound design video. But, man. So, alright, I can't get too carried away. So the first one, the poly algorithm. So I'm going to change the setting back to default. Because those don't get randomized. Pretty sure. Or rather, these are all plus or minus. So they actually will change. They'll act on whatever the setting in the synth is. If the dial is like halfway on the synth parameter, it'll move it up or down. But if it's like all the way here, it'll still just move it up or down from there. So I'm going to set it at 0 so it'll stay where we want it. So now my random. So the first algorithm, poly, great. Digital polysynth, great for FM types of keys. You can get some cool stuff. Monosynth, digital monosynth. You can get basses, leads. If you're playing with it, move the octaves up and down just to see what it sounds like in different octaves. Things can sound different than you expect. Just give it a try. You can get some real like gritty stuff out of it. Nice, nice. Pad. Ooh, okay, so I'm going to come back to pad and mod. Real quick though, analog. So analog is just poly, but analog. So for the other one, I felt like gets a lot of like the digital types of things. This is like analog modeled. So the way that these work is they, sorry to get sidetracked again, but the way that these work is from everything I can understand from what Roland has said, what I've seen on YouTube, what I'm just hearing, is that they take, like the analog thing has some set points that are established and then some ranges for other set points. So it randomizes those ranges, but some things are like well established. So it can get to like similar sounding sorts of things pretty often. So analog, this is a poly synth that, you know, you can get some pretty spicy like Juno, Jupiter types of like poly patches. There's the mono, analog mono, which will get you your straightforward like leads and basses and stuff, which is great. I think this sounds great. Analog pad will give you, you know, pretty much what it says on the tin. There's some reverb on there. You can always adjust the attack too, plus or minus from where it's at. They all sound pretty nice. The next ones are all like drum synths, and wow, let me tell you, just real quick, drum. The drum in particular, I think, is great for getting like white noise types of like swells and sweeps and stuff. I think the Roland, the MC-101 does have a little bit of problems sometimes with getting white noise accomplished, with getting some sweeps accomplished, and with particular like long evolving textures. And I think the random thing really like knocks both of those out of the park. So you can use this plus a little bit of attack to really get some like nice sounding white noise stuff out of it. And it's fantastic. I think that's really works really well with the drum randomizer. The kick one, I have the attack still turned up, but even that, see, like you can get some like great sounds out of that. Let me turn the attack back down so you can really hear it. Again, mess with what octave you're in. Broadly, on these guys, like this is gonna, you got like a pitch control, you got a release control. Again, I'm gonna make a whole video on how this works. There's some like modifier and then like a reverb. It's fantastic stuff, honestly. The snare, you can really like, this can be a whole drum synth. It's fantastic. You know, great. Again, great for white noise. The cowbell, if you crank this mod knob, goes from like real tinny. I love that. That's so cool. All right, so that's all I want to do with that, except I do want to go to the pad and mono, because I think, or the pad and mod. So the pad one is like a digital pad, and you can get some real slick sounding like pads out of it. And I think they're great. But I think what's really cool is if you drop this like a couple of octaves, you can get these real like rumbling low textures. Let me go up one. Let me see. Just try this a couple times. See what happens. I don't hear that one. Ooh, it's real slow. Oh, that sounds really nice. Wow. All right, you know what? Real quick, I want to save that. So I'm just gonna leave that here. I'm gonna make a new clip. Now I can always come back to that. I'm gonna write the project again. Write project, overwrite. That goes real quick now, so I don't even mind doing it on video. That's great. That's honestly probably my favorite feature. So now I'm just gonna come back to note, random, pad, and we're back here. Oh yeah, see this one? Now I'm gonna drop this a couple octaves. You hear that? It's bouncing between headphones. That's some creepy textural stuff. Look at that. And now even if I wanted to come here and change the attack higher. Ooh, yeah, it's that smooth, growling sort of bass. I think you can get a lot of cool stuff out of the pad, algorithm. So that's just what I wanted to say about pad. Again, really I think try to push these things to their limits. It's so exciting. And now we're gonna come back, random and mod. So the mod just gives crazy stuff. You have no idea what's gonna come out of it. A lot of times it's pretty buzzy. But just twist these a little bit. Let's release. Crazy stuff. Again, you can get real like just crazy like real like sound designy stuff from this, and it just every one of these gives you such a good starting point. There's a video of Anderton synths, I think, where they review a different Roland synth, like the JDXI maybe, and shoot, I forgot his name. I remember the guy, but you know the guy, the Anderton synth guy, and he's playing, and he has this button that just like he calls it like the fall in love with the synth button, and that's what I feel like this is. Like you just hit this with on any of them, and you get some crazy stuff coming out, and man. Talk about like quirky. I don't think I've ever seen anything kind of quite like this, especially on a device like this. And it is, I'm telling you, I tried to make this video like 3 days ago when the update came out. I've just been playing with these things since then, and like it's amazing, absolutely amazing. And I think if you have a sound in mind, you can get there. There's no question. You've all hopefully maybe seen my sound design video about what you can do with the sound design on this thing, but I am telling you, like, there's a whole nother world has opened up for us MC-101 users, and I am just so excited, and I really think this random thing just like, it's really blown me out of the water. I am so excited about it. But like I said, I'm gonna make a whole other video about all the, listen to that, all the crazy stuff that we can do with this, and yeah, no, I'm excited. I think it's been a good day, good week for the MC line, and with that, I'm gonna say bye. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks a ton for checking it out. Thanks everybody for continuing to subscribe. Still absolutely blown away by your comments. Just let me know what I can do better, what I can do more of, and thanks for sticking around, and I will see you next time. So thanks a lot.